Good morning. It's 10:01. I'm going to go ahead and call to order the meeting of the License and Variance Board. Today is Wednesday, September 23rd, 2020. My name is Roy Acree. I'm the fire chief. To my left is Frank Martin, the Public Works Director. To his left is Mary Moore, the Director of the Library. Also present is Tina Monahan up front with the City Clerk's Office for the official meeting minutes. First item on today's agenda is item 3A, Privilege License Request, LIC 2020-14 for Beer and Wine Retail Package, 475 Windy Hill Road, Good Luck 3 LLC, DBA Chevron, with Amin Kamini as agent. Is the applicant present? If you could please step forward to the podium. Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Could you please state your name?
Amin Kamani.
Okay, so this is a privilege license request for beer and wine retail packages. Our understanding that you have successfully completed the certification for retail responsible alcohol sales?
Yes, sir.
So could you describe to the board your role at this location?
I'll be the manager over there,
Okay,
and my employee's going to run the store.
okay. So how long have you been there?
About a couple of months now.
Okay, do you typically work there? Are you physically in the store?
Yes, I'm there in the morning times, yeah.
Okay. Can you describe some practices that you have in place to ensure that alcohol sales are done responsibly per state law?
All employees and everybody are trained not to sell to underage people, and we check IDs for everybody. And if somebody looks alcohol consumed,
Okay.
we try not to sell them. Yeah, we take responsibilities pretty seriously.
Okay. Any questions for the applicant? Okay. For the record, the Smyrna Police Department did do a background investigation for this applicant and found nothing that would prohibit the issuance of this privilege license. Also, you understand that the Smyrna Police Department does do undercover operations to ensure
Yes, sir.
that alcohol is being sold legally. And
Yes,
if anybody's found in violation of that, they can and typically are arrested and taken to jail.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, if there's no other questions, we'll entertain a motion for 3A.
Making a motion to approve privilege license request, LIC 2020-4 beer and wine retail package, 475 Windy Hill Road, Good Luck 3 LLC, Chevron.
Second.
We have a motion to approve 3A that's been properly seconded. If there's no further discussion, I'll call for a vote. Motion approved unanimously, 3-0. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Next item on the agenda is 3B, another privilege license request, LIC 2020-15, beer, wine, and liquor retail pouring, 2731 Southcom Drive, Southeast, El Toro Corporation, DBA El Toro number 2, Wings and Cantina, with the applicant Ureli Juarez Diaz as agent. Is the applicant present? Could you please step forward? And for the record, if you could state your name, please.
Yes, Ureli Juarez Diaz.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So similar to the last applicant that you just heard, we're going to ask you some similar questions.
Okay.
You have completed the responsible sale of alcohol certification?
Yes.
Okay. And talk about this business, because it's beer, wine, and liquor retail pouring, and it's a wings and cantina. So what is your role at the location?
So I'm the manager, and it's going to be a Mexican restaurant. We're trying to do something family-ish for families to come in and have dinner or lunch.
Okay.
We haven't opened yet.
Okay.
So we haven't opened yet. But I will be the manager, and I will be training all the employees and making sure that they all do get an alcohol permit to sell alcohol as well, and that they are 18 and up. And I will be staying there from like daily, every day probably.
Okay. So do you have any type of policies or training for your staff to ensure that they know when to check IDs and how to do all that?
Oh, yes. First of all, I won't hire anyone under 18 either, for the reason that they can't sell alcohol.
Right.
Second of all, they already know that the customers cannot consume 50% more of alcohol There has to be a level out where they have to sell more food than alcohol. And I will be training them myself since I did a certification already to check ID. We did say that if they look older than 55, they don't have to ask for an ID. Because I feel like 30 or 40 still, some people look like they're older, like 17-year-olds look like they're 20-something. So I wouldn't count on that. I'm going to be training them
Okay.
as far as that.
Any questions for the applicant?
So you said you're not open yet?
No.
So this is a brand-new restaurant?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, okay. Oh, she says no. Ah, okay, I understand now.
They closed a couple of months ago, yes.
And have you ever been the registered agent for, with this type of privilege license before? Have you ever had this type of license before?
I do have an alcohol license, but
Like a
it's in
server
Cherokee
permit?
County. Yes,
Yeah,
in Cherokee County.
okay. For the record, the Smyrna Police Department did complete a background investigation for this applicant and found nothing that would prohibit the issuance of this privilege license. If there are no further questions, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve LIC 2020-15 privilege license request, beer, wine, liquor, retail pouring, 2731 South Cobb Drive, Southeast, El Aturon Corp., doing business as El Aturon No. 2 Wings and Cantina, with Ureli Juarez Diaz as agent.
Second.
We have a motion to approve that's been properly seconded. If there's no further discussion, I'll call for the vote. All in favor? Motion passes unanimously, 3-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is scheduled to be tabled, but it is V20-048 to allow parking on a gravel surface, land lot 630, 3075 Jonquil Drive, FP Gimmel, Georgia, LP. This item is to be tabled to the October 14th, 2020 License Variance Board meeting. Do I hear a motion to table?
I make a motion to table public hearing, V20-048, allow parking on gravel surface, land lot 630, 3075 Jonquil Drive. The item to be tabled October 14th, 2020, LVB board meeting.
Second.
We have a motion to table has been properly seconded. If there's no further discussion, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor? Motion passes unanimously. Next item is 3D, public hearing V20-044 to allow second story on a building with non-conforming setbacks, land lot 344, located at 600 Florida Drive. The applicant is Scott Hadel. Is Mr. Hadel present? Good morning. If you could please state your name for the record.
Good morning. Scott Hadel.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you to describe your project, specifically, you know, the thing that has warranted this variance request. You can feel free to leave your mask on if you want to. If you feel like, you know, while you're at the podium you want to speak and take your mask off, that's fine as well. Okay? So this is a variance to allow a second story on a building with non-conforming setback. Could you tell us a little bit about the project?
Well, the property is about 20,000 square feet. It was built, the existing structure was built in 1959. There was a fire earlier this year that pretty much diminished the entire roof system. Well, we want to go in and regentrify the structure, turn it into a EFIS surface front, and give it a second level, increasing it by 1,000 square feet. And the setback in the front is the variance that we're asking to allow the second story for those purposes.
Okay. Any questions for the applicant at this time? Okay, sir, if you could just have a seat for just a minute. Stay close, though. I'm going to call up Community Development, Caitlin Crow, for some background on this. Good morning, Ms. Crow.
Good morning, thank you. Caitlin Crow, Planner 1, Community Development. So this variance is V20-044 to allow for a second story on an existing structure with a non-conforming front setback. So the applicant is requesting the variance to build a second story, as Mr. Hadel said, on this existing commercial structure with the existing non-conforming front setback since, as Mr. Haydell mentioned as well, it was constructed in 1959 and already has that existing front setback of 31.8 feet. To build build a second story on the existing structure, the applicant is requesting a variance to reduce the front setback from 40 feet to 30 feet to allow for the construction. Section 802 of the zoning ordinance does require the front setback of 40 feet for the general commercial zoning district. So the subject building on the property did sustain fire damage to the interior, making it currently unusable. The fire investigation is no longer active as of February 21st of this year per the fire marshal's office. Due to the fire damage, the applicant is proposing to remodel the one-story brick structure by adding that second story and making the bottom floor usable again. The applicant will be keeping the existing slab and first floor framing to build the second story, and the elevations do reflect a modern stucco exterior with an exterior staircase to go to the second floor. The existing one-story brick building is currently 1,191 square feet. With the addition, the building will be roughly 2,200 square feet with a 71 square foot awning in the front. With the addition, the parking requirements did change due to that square footage, affecting both the clothing boutique and the subject building on the property. Per sections 906.3 and 906.10, the subject building and clothing boutique, respectively, creates the overall parking requirements of 11 spaces on the subject parcel. The applicant has proposed to maintain the existing 8 on the upper parking lot area, which is on the north end of the property, and add 4 additional parking spaces to the south end of the property, also lower parking lot in our circumstances. The ADA accessible parking space will be in the upper parking area and will have a walkway that goes to both structures to allow for access to the first floor. The fire marshal and city engineer have both reviewed these plans and do support the request. The subject property, again, was constructed before the zoning code and has that existing non-conforming setback. Strict application of this would require the foundation to be completely removed and replaced, resulting in additional unneeded land disturbance. Community development believes the variance requested is the minimum variance needed to build the second story, and the hardship's not self-imposed since the original structure was built prior to the adoption of the zoning ordinance. And community development does not foresee any negative impacts to the surrounding neighbors. It has been properly posted with no site distance issues. So after reviewing the variance application, staff does support the request and approval to allow a second story on an existing structure with a non-conforming front setback with 3 stipulations. 1, approval of the requested variance shall be conditioned upon the development of the property in substantial compliance with the site plan and elevations submitted with the variance application. 2, compliant ADA access shall be accomplished from the ADA parking space to the first floor of each building on the subject property. Compliance will be verified by the fire marshal at the time of permitting. And number 3, the applicant shall comply with the city's current tree ordinance. All required tree protection measures shall be adhered to by the applicant during construction. And with that, I can answer any questions.
Any questions for staff?
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Crowe. Mr. Haydell, if you could please join us back at the podium. Thank you. Just for a second. So we just heard Ms. Crowe's background on this request, and in that statement she read into the record 3 stipulations. Are you familiar with those stipulations, and do you agree with them?
Yes, I do.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for the applicant? This is a public hearing. If there's anybody here that would like to speak for or against this variance request, I would ask that you would step forward now. Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve V20-044, allow second story on building with non-conforming setbacks, land lot 344, 600 Floyd Drive, Scott Haydell.
Second.
We have a motion to approve that's been seconded. If there's no further discussion, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor? Motion's approved unanimously, 3-0. Congratulations. Good luck.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is 3E. Actually, I believe that E and F are both the same subject property, but the first one is a public hearing variance request V 20-049, reduction of side setback from 10 feet to 1 feet for land lot 778 located at 2535 Rolling View Drive. Nina Medina is the applicant. Is the applicant present? If you could please step forward and state your name for the record.
Good morning. My name is Nina Medina.
Good morning. So I know that you've got two variance requests. The first one is for the side setback, and the next one's for the front setback. We have to hear as a board those two individually, but if you want to, go ahead and just kind of describe what it is that you're doing in total,
Okay.
and then we'll, you won't have to repeat everything twice unless you just want to.
Well, I'd rather not.
Yeah.
So basically, I have a home that has a carport, which I received a variance for several years ago, and we've decided that we really want an enclosed two-car garage. So that's the purpose of the side and front setback.
Okay. Any questions at this time for the applicant? Okay, if you could please have a seat. I'll probably call you back up in a minute. And once again, background from staff, Ms. Crow.
All right, Caitlin Crow, Planner 1 Community Development. So I am going to go ahead and describe these two together just to save on a little time here. So these variances are first V20-049 to reduce the side setback from 10 feet to 1 foot, and V20-050 to reduce the front setback from 35 feet to 33 feet. So the subject property is a little under a half an acre lot on the east side of Rolling View Drive. The applicant is building that enclosed garage in place of the existing carport, and Section 801 does regulate the setbacks for the R15 zoning district. So as Ms. Medina said, the applicant did receive approval for this variance in 2014, which was case V14-007. For the side setback, side setback reduction of 10 feet to 0 feet to allow for the construction of the existing carport. Since the proposed garage is not within the same footprint, it has moved forward. The variance does not apply to this, and thus the new variances are being requested. The applicant is proposing to replace that existing carport and build a roughly 440 square foot attached garage on the side of the existing home. The garage will have cement siding with a shingle roof, and it will be painted to match the existing home to kind of keep the cohesive nature. To access the new garage, the applicant will use the existing driveway to avoid any further land disturbance. And according to the site plan, the side setback reduction does vary from roughly 5 feet to 1 foot due to the location and orientation of the home and the lot lines. So due to this existing concrete driveway, the most logical area would be to place it where the current carport is. It just decreases, again, that land disturbance from both the home and the adjacent properties. Strict application of the ordinance would deny the applicant any ability to add any type of enclosed parking over that existing driveway since that driveway is already within the setback. Additionally, to create the space needed to allow for 2 cars to enter the garage, the applicant did have to move the structure forward because of that orientation of the home and lot lines. The adjacent building to the south will exceed the minimum 10 feet of building separation from the subject property, thus no fire suppression system is required. So the placement and orientation of the house and driveway has been existing since the house was built in 1966, so the hardship's not self-created, and strict application would deny the applicant any ability to enclose this garage. So we do believe this is the minimum variance needed, and anywhere else on the property would just not be feasible with the existing placements. It has been properly posted with no sight distance issues. So after reviewing the variance application, staff does support the request and recommends approval to reduce the side setback from 10 feet to 1 foot and reduce the front setback from 35 feet to 33 feet with the following 3 conditions. 1, Approval of the requested variance shall be conditioned upon the development of the property in substantial compliance with the site plan submitted with the variance application. Number 2, appropriate gutters and downspouts will be installed to divert stormwater away from adjacent property prior to final inspection. And number 3, the roof overhang shall not encroach into the adjacent property. And with that, I can answer any questions.
Do we have any questions for staff?
Is there any issue related to the tree ordinance with this addition?
No, the single-family homes are exempt from the tree ordinance for construction unless it's a brand-new single-family home.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you,
All right.
Ms. Crowe.
Thank you.
Ms. Medina, if you could please step forward. You heard staff read into record the background, and within that statement, she mentioned the 3 conditions. Do you accept those 3 conditions as stated?
I do.
Okay, thank you. This is a public hearing. If there's anybody here that would like to speak either for or against item 3E, I would ask that you would step forward now. Seeing none, if there's no further discussion of the board, I'll call for a vote. I'll entertain a motion first.
I make a motion to approve public hearing variance request V20-049, reduction of side setback from 10 feet to 1 foot, land lot 778 at 2535 Rolling View Drive.
Second.
We have a motion approved that's been properly seconded. There's no further discussion. I'll call for a vote. All those in favor? Motion passes unanimously. Next item is 3F, same subject property variance request V20-050, reduction of front setback from 35 to 33 feet, land lot 778, 2535 Rolling View Drive, Nina Medina as the applicant. Ms. Medina, do you have any additional information to add? No. Okay, thank you. And staff, Ms. Crowe, do you have any additional information? Thank you. Are there any questions for the applicant or for staff from the board? This is a public hearing. If there's anybody here that would like to speak for or against item 3F, I would ask that you step forward at this time. Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve variance request V20-050, reduction of front setback from 35 feet to 33 feet, land lot 778, 2535 Rolling View Drive, Nina Medina applicant.
Second.
We have a motion approved that's been properly seconded. If there's no further discussion of the board, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is 3G, which is a public hearing administrative appeal. Appeal of Community Development Director's decision to issue a building permit for the renovation of a carport located at 2856 Parkwood Road. David G. Lincoln is the requester. Mr. Lincoln, are you present, sir? Good morning. And just as you've heard, if you could please state your name for the record.
Yes, David G. Lincoln.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, so you are appealing the decision of the Community Development Director's decision to issue a building permit for the renovation of a carport.
That's correct.
So, if you would, the floor is yours. Go ahead and let us know what the issue is.
Okay. Well, essentially, when a carport was removed next door, which was an aluminum canopy, one of those structures that people would put up, as just a quick sort of car protective sort of thing. Anyway, that had been there for many years, all the years I lived there. And the carport, the canopy was removed back September a year ago. And once that was removed, I thought, well, I called Ms. Crowe and asked about the side yard and whether or not that required a variance to rebuild in the side yard. And at that point, I was told that that would be the case and that there would be a notification of such variance meeting. And from that point, I kind of thought that that was, the way it would play out, really. So what's happened now, there is a carport structure there. It's been replaced because a permit was issued. And I guess from what I'm reading is that the carport's not an accessory structure. And so therefore, it does not fall under the code that I cited. So, although I do believe it's an accessory structure because according to the Smyrna code here, It does say, when an accessory building is attached to the principal building by breezeway, passageway, or similar means, it shall comply with the yard requirements of the principal building to which it is accessory. So I guess that's maybe where some of the confusion is about that. So,
Okay. Any questions at this time for the applicant? All right, sir, if you could just have a seat up front somewhere.
okay.
I think I'm going to call for the Community Development Director, Rusty Martin, if you could please give the board some background.
Good morning, Rusty Martin, Community Development Director. Mr. Lincoln summed it up pretty well. I'd gotten a call probably about, I'd say probably about a month ago regarding this issue. The applicant, or the adjoining property that had the carport, had made an application to the city of Smyrna for a renovation of the carport, and they had taken down the aluminum carport, and they were going to build a new structure that was going to have a shed roof, shingles, and decorative columns. Those improvements were going to be in the same size, same location as the previous carport. I made a determination based off of the code, which it says if it's attached by roof, wall, or so, it is not an accessory structure. It's part of the main building. At that point, it was the previous carport was encroaching into the setback. However, we consider those legal nonconforming uses based on Article 11 for nonconforming use. The structure, the use did not change. The structure did not go away for a year. So with that being said, they were able to maintain their use of that property. In addition, when they submitted when they submitted for the permit application, they showed that it was going to be the same size as it was previously. It was going back on the same footers that was previously. So at that point, I considered it not to be an expansion of the use, so they could go forward. And then the last evaluation tool we do with that is also checking to see the valuation of the improvement, and that it's not exceeding 50% of the replacement costs of the structure, which would be the carport and the home, since it's part of the home. When I talked to Mr. Lincoln on the phone, and he can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't know that his concern was really the use. I think it was the materials used for the structure, and the pot going from aluminum to wood and combustible material, and that just being close to his home. After I talked to Mr. Lincoln, I approached the fire marshal's office. Typically staff understands that there's got to be a minimum separation for homes from each other of at least 10 feet, or if it's closer than that, then they've got to use non-combustible materials, and there may be requirements for sprinkling and stuff like that. So I felt comfortable that we weren't expanding the use. The outside of the structure, the carport, was 12 feet from Mr. Lincoln's home, and at the closest point, and that we met all the requirements that they didn't need to do anything special with respect to the materials. So after I talked to Mr. Lincoln, I had the fire marshal go out and formally review the structure that was out there. They were probably about 90% complete with the structure at that point, but they hadn't called in for their final inspection. So we measured from the eaves to Mr. Lincoln's home using a laser measure. That was on the back corner of the structure. It was 12 feet at that point, and it's more like 14 feet on the front side. In addition, we looked and did an inspection of the site, and then he went back and he reviewed the code. the fire code for this scenario and looked at what the fire code said. And let me read that to you since he's not here today. Per the fire marshal's office, the current structure is classified as a carport, Group U, under the 2018 IBC, Section 312.1. In his estimation, it would have also been classified as a carport prior to the renovation. According to the 2018 IBC Section 406.3.3, carports are covered structures, either freestanding or attached to the side of the building, for purposes of providing shelter for motor vehicles. To be classified as such, carports must be open on at least two sides, as is the case with the subject property. This openness is what allows a fire condition to vent quickly to the outside, and in fact, this openness probably results in carports fires being detected much earlier than enclosed parking structures as a private garage. The openness of the carport also results in less storage activity and therefore lowers the chance of fire. If it were not open on two sides, it would be considered a garage and then must be separated from the adjoining dwelling or other occupancy. Under Section 406.3.3.1, a separation is not required between a group R3 and U carport, provided that the carport is entirely open on two or more sides and there is not an enclosed area above of which there is not in this case. According to IBC, a roof structure such as a carport open on two or more sides without any enclosed uses above poses no special hazard to the occupants of the dwelling. Were a fire to start under the carport roof, the smoke, hot gases, and flames would be able to escape out the open sides, providing the structure with an adequate amount of protection. In essence, the fire code does not require any separation between a carport and the adjoining dwelling or occupancy. So we've looked at that. I think that review in that code section addressed what I thought was Mr. Lincoln's concerns with respect to his concerns of the carport. In addition, we are also looking at the other conditions within the neighborhood and seeing, is this prevalent in this neighborhood? Mr. Lincoln has the same exact condition where his carport is encroaching on the side setback. Granted, it is a larger separation between the side of the carport and the adjoining home. And then there are several other carports in similar fashion within the Cheney Woods subdivision in itself. That's all I got. I'll be happy to answer any questions for you or answer any follow-up from Mr. Lincoln.
So I just had a couple, really more of a summation to make sure that I'm appropriately understanding, okay? So the old, what I'm going to call the old carport that was attached, that's since been torn down, that was classified as a legal non-conforming structure, right?
Yes.
And the carport redo, for lack of better terms, is connected to the home and therefore not considered an accessory structure. Is that correct?
Right.
So
because it's attached via the roof
right.
to the structure.
And the new carport that replaced the old is in essence or in fact the same footprint, right?
Yes.
So I think it's interesting because we just heard, I think it was 3D, somebody is doing something similar. They're turning a carport into a garage, but several facts, but one fact was that they kind of changed the use and they changed the footprint, and that's the determining
yes.
factor, among others, that spawned the fact that person had to come in for a variance request. This, in fact, did not, because it didn't change the use, it didn't change the footprint, and it was not gone for more than a year. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Had we got had they come in for the permit and it showed, you know, either the structure moving towards the street further or towards Mr. Lincoln's house closer, or even just going from the front of the house to the back face of the house and expanded that way, yes, they would have to come in for a variance at that point. They were expanding the structure beyond the original footprint.
And, you know, loosely relevant here, but relevant nonetheless, this board hears that type of variance in general, you know, a side setback encroachment of some number of feet because of a carport or a garage. We hear that almost every license and variance board every 2 weeks, and those are typically approved without issue.
Yeah, I mean,
because of how common it is and prevalent that type of thing is.
Well, yes, Smyrna, particularly in that part of town, on the west side of town, has a large housing stock of, you know, 1-story brick ranches that, you know, were 3-bedroom, 1-bath ranches that were built in the 60s, 70s, and some of them had built-in carports and some of them don't. Right. And the way the housing market is going today, people want to have covers over their cars.
Yeah.
You know, we have large specimen trees all throughout Smyrna, large oak trees that drop limbs and everything else, and people want to protect their cars from those issues. So what we see is when people want to do major renovations to their house, usually that includes building a carport onto their house or a new garage in some form. But that's probably the most common variance that we get, and typically they want to use the existing driveway and existing infrastructure there. And, you know, a lot of times that request is to add that carport on the side, and typically we recommend approval from staff, and typically they get approved from the license and variance board.
So the only other issue was with regard to proximity, just, I know that you stated this, but just for the record, the structure as built with regard to proximity to the applicant's home is beyond 10 feet. Is that correct?
Yes, yes. But we went out and used the laser measure, and it's tough because Mr. Lincoln's got ivy or some form of vegetation on his side, so I don't know if it's hitting a leaf and bouncing back or hitting the wall, but when we put it on the outside eave of the carport and tried to hit a spot on the wall, it was 12 feet on the back corner and then 14 feet on the front corner.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Rusty? Thank you, Mr. Martin. Mr. Lincoln?
Yes.
If you could, please step forward.
Sure. A couple of things that concern me. It's this creep kind of thing that happens where...
I'm sorry, was the...
Creep. You know, where people start... You have a carport where most of these mid-century places had, where you pull straight in, as the neighbor's house did, and mine as well. But then it becomes an additional room to the house, and then it's enclosed and heated, and then it creeps into where now you need a carport beyond the original carport. And that's what I fear may happen here. That now it's a much more substantial structure with large columns, and what's going to keep them from screening it in or putting glass panels in there? And then it just becomes another part of the house. It's just that close, and really the distance is from here to the stage. That's the distance we're talking about. And as Rusty said, I do as well have one of those non-conforming carports, and I would expect that if I were to tear that down and then come before you to put up another one, if I'm in the side yard, I would think that I need permission from the neighbor to do that.
Well, so the thing that would spawn the variance request in that hypothetical scenario is a few things. If you were to tear yours down and propose to rebuild something that changed the use, okay. If you tore it down and it was torn down for longer than 12 months,
right.
Or if you changed the footprint of the existing versus the new versus if you wanted to expand forward, side, front, back, that type of thing. But again, that's why there's this, term legal nonconforming. We have these legal nonconforming properties all throughout the city, like
Right.
Rusty said, but before the current ordinances and rules that we follow, these houses were built in the 60s and 70s. They don't conform, because that's why they're called legal nonconforming, right? So it's my understanding, after listening to Rusty, as he stated, it's not an accessory structure because it's connected. They didn't change the use. It wasn't torn down for greater than 12 months, and they built it back in exactly the same place that the old one was. Basically, they tore down the aluminum and built this other one that's made out of wood.
Right.
And so that is the fact that it's made out of wood is only an issue if it's within 10 feet of an adjoining structure.
Okay. I guess what I had hoped that maybe in the major renovation they did to the home, that they would have considered going to the front, change the front setback, which then you're not removing this narrow side space.
Yeah.
Go to the front, but that didn't happen.
Well, I mean, that's, it's up to whoever owns the property to decide,
Right.
which way they want to go. And,
Yeah.
and, but back to your, if you have a concern about, well, I think you or called it like a creep thing. What if they change the use in the future? Well, if they change the use, if they follow the rules, they're supposed to come back and, if they want to do any work, they'll have to come back and get a building permit. And that
Right.
process, that application for a building permit, would spawn the review of the application to determine whether or not there were any needed variances, or those types of things.
Mhm. So then, per the definition of the accessory building, what would that be if it says, as it is here, when accessory building is attached to the principal? What would the accessory building be then?
Basically, one that's not attached. I'll let Mr. Martin address that
Well,
question.
but I mean, right here in 501.5 says when an accessory building is attached in the principal building by breezeway passageway. So that leaves me kind of confused as to what the carport is.
Right.
It's not really a dwelling. I mean, you're not living in it, right? You're not sleeping in that.
Mr. Martin.
We go by the definition of the code, and yeah, there may be conditions where, you have a pool deck or you have something that attaches to the building, that I'm trying to think of a condition where,
Well, even the semantic, and I'm just talking out loud here, the semantics of what it's labeled as, accessory structure, non-accessory structure, the facts that it's connected to the building, it didn't change the footprint, it wasn't torn down for longer than 12 months, they didn't change the use, no matter what we call it,
Okay.
the facts are still the same. That in the director of the community development's opinion, that modification from an aluminum structure to a wooden structure with all those other things I stated as a fact did not spawn the need for a side setback reduction variance.
yeah, I mean, we have two conflicting codes, I guess, at this point, because you have the definition of accessory structure tell you that it's not an accessory structure, and then within
it
section
refers to it as an
501,
accessory
and then it
structure, yeah.
refers to an attachment
Yeah.
to that point.
Yeah, well, excuse me, that's what confused me here is when it talks about that. Says an accessory building is attached to the main building in a substantial manner, such as by wall or roof. And then later on, it goes to say it is not an accessory structure.
Yeah,
And
that's some
what-
conflicting language.
I just don't understand that
I
at
agree.
all.
Yeah, that's confusing.
That's code from
Yeah.
probably 1974 when the code was adopted. I mean, so we can probably need to clean that up.
Look at maybe an amendment in the future.
One other thing. So what does that mean to other people? I got these pictures in here that just show other situations like you were talking about. Does that mean that all these people with non-conforming structures like that can go directly to you and get a permit to rebuild without a variance for the side setback?
No, of course, we're going to go through and review what the case-by-case basis is and
But what
see what's
guidelines do you have for that? How do you make a
everything
determination?
that I just laid out in the meeting today in this appeal.
Right.
So we'll look and see, is it an expansion of use?
But
Is
if
it-
in an aerial view, the plan view remains the same, and let's say that where the columns were placed, that's still the same measurement, then those two things would then define the ability
We've
so
had,
we can
we,
rebuild?
we've had a situation where, the footprint has remained the same and they've added a second story onto a building.
Right,
And we made them come back through the variance process because it was an expansion from a
Yeah.
one-story structure
Well, I
at
can
that
tell
point
you,
to a
not to
two-story.
interrupt, but I can tell you that every particular property, has its unique facts.
Right.
And I can also assure you that every building permit request that comes in, land disturbance permit, all those things are measured by standards which are outlined within the city code of ordinances. Did you have any additional or further information?
no, like I said, I was just confused by that accessory building language in there. And once again, I just think that the lack of some sort of a standard in gauging how you would look at somebody else's carport, non-conforming structure, and then
Right.
allow that or not. So,
Well, professionally, I would disagree that there's a lack of a standard. I think we're covered up in standards. I
Yeah.
think the standards are what guide the decisions made by Rusty and his staff.
well, so if I were to remove my carport, could I assume then that I could do the same?
Look, we can talk about hypothetical scenarios all
Right.
day. Do you have any additional information that's relevant to this request or this appeal?
Well, the reason I asked about mine is because that was brought up as far as being another structure of the same sort.
I think it would just depend on the particulars of what it is that you wanted to do. That's why I said, I'm not, I want to be able to give you as much time, believe me,
Yeah.
as
Well-
needed, but we're not going to sit here and contemplate hypothetical scenarios that don't exist.
Okay, I understand. It's just that, I guess what I'm getting from this is plan view, same area, roof area, and the footprint. Those two things would allow for a favorable,
I mean, so long as you don't change the use, change the footprint, all of those, that you'd still have to request and obtain a building permit.
okay, but not a variance in that case.
It just depends on what you were asking to do in your request. If you want to change the use, change the footprint, those types of things, then it could.
Yeah,
It just depends on where your proposed new project would fall in relation to any front, side, or rear setback.
right. No, I mean exactly just leaving it in the same spot, just a rebuild. Same use.
So you want to, in this hypothetical that I said we weren't going to talk about, if you tore down your carport and built a carport,
The same exact
the
thing.
same
yes.
exact thing,
Yes.
yeah, then
Same thing
the
applies.
same thing would apply.
Okay.
You don't
Well,
enclose
the
the, you
reason I
don't
asked
enclose
that
the
is
walls, you don't change the footprint, you don't let it be torn down for longer than 12 months.
Exactly. Okay. The reason I asked that is because of all the other neighbors that have a similar situation. They're going to wonder the same sort of thing. And
Right.
I think many of them probably leave the old structure up for fear of removing one and then not being able to put another one back.
Well, they may, but as property owners, they have the right to,
Yeah.
request to do whatever they want to do with their property they own.
Okay.
And I'll say, we deal with property owners all the time that before they get started with a project, they'll ask, what am I allowed to do? What can I do? Can I leave this here? And we'll walk them through all those scenarios.
Right.
So, there may be people in what you're saying that are fearful of losing their non-conforming use at that point. But we do have a lot of people that come in to ask the questions and we guide them through the process. We'll figure out what they want to do. Our standard for our office is we're trying to work through yes, so we'll figure out the process in which they need to get there. If we can handle it administratively, we'll do that. If not, and they have to go through the variance process or through to mayor and council, that we'll take them through that process. I mean, we process 60 to 70 variances a year through this board, on top of 20 to 25 rezonings a year. And, we're not afraid to take stuff to council for review.
Okay.
I mean, that's what we're here for. But we're also not trying to be an impediment on people improving their properties. They have property rights. If our code says they don't have to do something, we're not going to arbitrarily take them through a code, through a process that is not warranted.
Well, it just made me wonder what the reasons for side yard, front yard setbacks, what the purpose of that is.
I mean, at the time when the code is enacted, is to have some uniformity within the structures along a block and make sure that everything's sort of in line. But you also, the code has the, the variance process and everything else in the nonconformity sections in it to address issues that were created before the code, and then if there's ever special hardships or unique circumstances, there's a method to address those as well.
Mr. Lincoln, I'm sure that Rusty or any of his staff would be available to you if you had any questions about any potential future projects on your property or anything like that. Do any of the board have any questions for Mr. Lincoln or for staff? Okay. This is a public hearing. If there's anybody here that would like to speak either for or against item 3G, I would ask that you would step forward now. Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I make a motion to deny Administrative Appeal of Community Development Director's decision to issue a building permit for the renovation of a carport at 2856 Parkwood Road.
Second.
I have a motion to deny the administrative appeal that's been properly seconded. If there's no further discussion, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor of the motion? Motion passes unanimously. Mr. Lincoln, thank you for coming before us today.
Thanks for your time.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate it.
Last item on the agenda is item 4A, approval of the September 9, 2020 License and Variance Board meeting minutes. Do I hear a motion to approve those minutes?
Make a motion for approval of the September 9, 2020 License and Variance Board meeting minutes, 2020-368.
Second.
We have a motion to approve the minutes that's been properly seconded. If there's no further discussion, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor? Motion passes unanimously. With that, it is 10:53, and I will officially adjourn this meeting.